Christmas was just around the corner. In Treeloo, England, 6-year-old Gwen Hines wrote a letter to Santa Claus asking for a new bike. She also wondered if it was really possible for Santa to deliver so many presents in just one night.
Dear Santa,
Gwen penned,
I think you are real, but how do you do it?
When Gwen's letter arrived at the North Pole, Arthur read it intently. Arthur's job was Mail Agent 3776, and he responded to every single letter that his dad, Santa, received.
And yes, do believe in Santa.
Arthur replied,
He is real. He's the greatest man ever.
On Christmas Eve, Santa flew around the world in the super cool, mile-wide sleigh ship, the S1. Teams of well-trained, highly skilled elves traveled with Santa to deliver presents. Arthur's older brother, Steve, managed the operation from the North Pole in the state-of-the-art Mission Control Room.
Okay, go, go, go!
Steve ordered into a headset.
Revised drop time to 14.13 seconds. Let's pick this up, people!
Steve loved high-tech gadgets like his Ho-Ho 3000 communicator, and did such a good job that everyone thought he would be named the new Santa Claus when his father retired. This was Santa's 70th Christmas mission. Surely he would pass on the job to Steve that night. Arthur was a great mail agent, but he wasn't cut out for present delivery missions. He was a clumsy worrywart who was terrified of heights and going too fast. But he loved everything about Christmas, especially his goofy reindeer slippers. When Arthur visited Mission Control on Christmas Eve, he slipped on the icy steps and crashed into several busy elves. The elves grumbled that Arthur was causing chaos and shouldn't be there.
I just want it to be perfect for every kid,
Arthur said to Steve. Steve appreciated Arthur's enthusiasm, but he agreed with the elves. He kindly asked Arthur to leave until the mission was over. Arthur left Mission Control disappointedly and went to visit his grandfather, Grandsanta. He was Santa Claus many, many years ago. Grandsanta didn't approve of Steve's high-tech gadgetry and thought he would still be the best Santa.
I could still do it now, Arthur,
Grandsanta said wistfully. Back in Mission Control, the elves erupted in celebration when Santa delivered the final present. The S1 flew home to the North Pole, and Santa emerged from the giant ship to rousing cheers.
Mission accomplished!
Santa joyously proclaimed. Arthur waved excitedly at his father and showed him his reindeer slippers. Santa smiled briefly and continued on to congratulate Steve. As the boisterous celebration continued, Santa took the stage. The entire crowd anxiously waited for him to pass the job of Santa on to Steve. Instead, he announced that he was looking forward to remaining Santa for another year. Everyone was stunned, especially Steve.
Merry Christmas, everyone!
Santa cheered obliviously to the silent crowd. Later that evening, while cleaning up after the mission celebration, a gift-wrapping elf named Bryony discovered a present had been left behind. A child was missed. Bryony reported the problem immediately to Steve. The gift was Gwen's pink twinkle bike. It was supposed to have been delivered, but had accidentally fallen off the conveyor belt. When Arthur learned of the missed child, he was very upset. He knew that if the present weren't delivered before the sun came up, it would ruin the magic of Christmas. Steve was realistic, however. After a night of flying around the world, it was too dangerous to fly the S1 again so soon. He reported in to Santa.
There's been a glitch.
He turned to his younger brother.
Arthur, Christmas is not a time for emotion. We will get 47785BXK a present within the window of Christmas.
Santa shook his head sadly and agreed.
But there it is. Can't be done.
Distraught, Arthur rushed to his office in the mail department. He matched the missing gifts tag to Gwen's letter. As he tried to conceive of a plan, Grandsanta entered Arthur's office. Arthur filled him in about the missed child and cried,
Gwen can't not have a present from Santa.
With a twinkle in his eyes, Grandsanta explained that it was possible to deliver the present on time. He took Arthur to the old sleigh barn and showed him the original sleigh used years ago in his Christmas missions, Eve. Nearby were 8 reindeer to guide the sleigh. They were descendants of the original 8 reindeer. They could fly if sprinkled with magic dust. However, Grandsanta would only deliver the present if Arthur joined him.
Me? On that? Up there? Pulled by them? No way.
Arthur protested.
I get travel sick, and I'm allergic to snow.
Despite his fear of flying, Arthur had to get the bike to Gwen. He hesitantly climbed into Eve with Grandsanta and his old pet reindeer Dasher. The sleigh tore out of the stable and lifted off into the night sky.
See! Who's Santa now? Ho, ho, ho!
Grandsanta whooped from the speeding sleigh. Arthur was terrified and gripped the dash tightly.
Look, Arthur, all those stars. We're one of them now. A shooting star,
said Grandsanta. As they tried to navigate toward Gwen's house in Treeloo, England, Grandsanta suddenly discovered Bryony hiding in the sleigh somewhere over Toronto.
Ye baubles, an elf!
Grandsanta gasped.
I can wrap anything, sir, with 3 bits of sticky tape. 3?
She boasted. She was going to help with the mission. Continuing their journey, Arthur, Grandsanta, and Bryony landed the sleigh on a grassy plain. They thought they were in England, but soon realized they were far off course. They landed in Africa. Hungry lions descended on the 3 lost travelers.
They won't eat me! I'm Santa!
Grandsanta hoped. Arthur distracted the lions with his reindeer slippers, and the trio made a hasty escape. As they soared from the savannah, magic dust fell onto the animals below. A cloud of flying lions, giraffes, zebras, and elephants floated up into the sky. Arthur input Treeloo once again into their ho-ho navigation device. Finally, Eve landed safely in Treeloo. Grandsanta moped because his camera was broken. Arthur realized that Grandsanta didn't really care about delivering Gwen's present. He just wanted a picture of himself to prove he could still be Santa. Arthur and Bryony went to deliver the bike to Gwen themselves.
So, what are your orders?
Bryony asked Arthur.
Do you want to order me to go through the cat flap?
Oh, yes, that's a great idea,
said Arthur. Arthur and Bryony tiptoed into the house with the twinkle bike. To their shock, there was already a present under the tree. They were in the wrong house. A very little and noisy dog barked and barked, so Arthur threw him a reindeer slipper to keep quiet as he and Bryony ran out of the house.
Happy Christmas,
Arthur told the dog. They had landed in Treeloo, Mexico instead of Treeloo, England. Arthur had picked the wrong Treeloo on his ho-ho. Meanwhile, at Mission Control, Steve was furious about Arthur and Grandsanta's secret trip. To make matters worse, the sleigh had been seen all over the world. The news reported that it was a UFO.
All this for one child.
Steve bemoaned.
In 600 million.
Steve called Arthur and Grandsanta on their Ho-Ho 3000 communicator. He demanded they return to the North Pole immediately. Grandsanta tried to blame Arthur.
It was him, Frosty the Madman. He forced me to come.
Grandsanta fibbed. Arthur told Steve that Santa, worried to tears about poor Gwen, would have wanted them to go. In response, Steve simply played Santa's answering machine message saying he was getting some shut-eye. Heartbroken, Arthur lost control of Eve and the occupants crashed onto a beach. The reindeer flew away, leaving them without a sleigh. Back at the North Pole, the elves heard that a child had been missed. They rushed to wake Santa, who tried to reassure them that one missed child didn't matter.
One child doesn't matter?
Asked a confused elf.
Which one?
Is there a list of children who don't matter?
Asked another. The elves informed Santa that Arthur and Grandsanta had left to deliver Gwen's bike. In order to find clues as to their whereabouts, Santa rushed to Arthur's mail office. Inside, he saw all of the loving letters Arthur had plastered around the office. Arthur truly loved Christmas. Santa hung his head down in shame, realizing that he should have been the one to try to deliver Gwen's present. Stranded on a beach in Cuba, Arthur was stunned. He was the only one who actually cared about Gwen. He finally understood it wasn't important who delivered the present. As long as Gwen had her bike by Christmas morning, she would still believe in Santa. His Christmas spirit returned, and he rushed to action. Arthur gathered Grandsanta, Bryony, and Dasher into an old dinghy they found on the beach. He rowed desperately to try to reach England by daybreak, but they only managed to go in circles in the ocean.
I've seen this before. Sleigh fever, they call it. Pressure of Christmas sends a man do-lally-tap.
Grandsanta recounted to Bryony.
Santa Claus the 16th got it, 1802. Every child that year got a sausage nailed to a piece of bark.
Suddenly, Grandsanta remembered that the reindeer would just keep flying until they eventually completed a circle around the entire world. This meant that their lost reindeer would soon be flying directly overhead. Arthur hurriedly hatched a plan. Although the mere thought was terrifying, he would float straight up into the air and catch the sleigh with the dinghy's anchor. But how?
Magic dust!
Arthur exclaimed. Arthur sprinkled magic dust on himself. He floated up into the sky. As the sleigh sped by in a whoosh, Arthur threw the anchor onto it and was swept out of sight. The lightning-fast reindeer pulled Arthur at a fantastic speed. With effort, he eventually gained control of Eve and swooped down to pick up Bryony, Grandsanta, and Dasher. Unfortunately, they dropped the Ho-Ho 3000 into the ocean. Back at the North Pole, Santa and Steve decided to fly the S1 after all, in order to deliver Gwen's present and rescue Arthur and Grandsanta. They argued about who would drive.
It's my S1,
Santa argued.
S for Santa.
Arthur and Grandsanta are out there probably not wearing nearly enough layers.
Mrs. Claus scolded.
And you two are bickering over a big red toy?
As the S1 flew away, the elves panicked. They thought the Claus family was deserting them at the North Pole. At the same time, Arthur, Grandsanta, and Bryony were racing towards Treeloo, England. But they had to hurry. They had to deliver the present to Gwen before the sun rose. They were lost and had no map or navigation device. Grandsanta smiled.
I know where we can find a map.
He flew them into space and showed him the world. They knew where to go now. Meanwhile, military leaders from around the world tracked Eve as it streaked through the sky. They thought the sleigh was a UFO. They formed a plan to shoot down the red mystery craft with missiles. Grandsanta's sleigh started to fall apart as they entered the Earth again from space. Suddenly, the reins broke free and the reindeer flew off. There were no reindeer to fly the sleigh. Unsteady on rickety legs, Dasher awkwardly climbed over Grandsanta and out of the sleigh. He grabbed the harness with his teeth and took control of Eve. In the meantime, a military plane headed straight towards the sleigh. Grandsanta told Arthur and Bryony to jump, while he tried to distract the pilot with Arthur's remaining slipper. Arthur and Bryony used Grandsanta's velvet toy sack to parachute out of the sleigh with Gwen's bike. Grandsanta released his old friend, Dasher, from the reins. He stood and saluted as the missile sailed towards the sleigh. He jumped from Eve just before impact. The military leaders thought they had a direct hit, and that the UFO was destroyed. The S1, meanwhile, had arrived in Treeloo. Steve knocked on the front door of Gwen's house.
Good morning, Gwen. Ho, ho, etc.
Steve recited.
I'm sure that even a child can understand that in an operation as complex as Christmas, there's always an insignificant margin of error. Which is you.
Steve looked down and was shocked to see a little boy instead of Gwen. The S1 had also landed in Trilou, Mexico instead of Trilou, England. The noisy little dog dropped Arthur's slipper and chomped on Steve's foot. Meanwhile, Arthur and Bryony crashed down in Trilou, England. They were only a mile from Gwen's house, but the sun was rising fast. They had to hurry. Arthur unwrapped Gwen's bike and rode as fast as he could.
No one gets an unwrapped present on my watch!
Bryony shouted. She jumped on the back of the bicycle and masterfully wrapped it as Arthur sped towards Gwen's house. Gwen was fast asleep in her bed. The sun's warm rays began to rise on the horizon and inch their way towards Gwen's window. Just as Gwen started to stir, the S1 silently glided over Trilou, blocking out the sun. As Arthur arrived at Gwen's house to finally deliver her bike, Santa and Steve joined him. Grandsanta unexpectedly came into sight, dashing through the snow in a garbage can. He was alive! Dasher dutifully led the old man as if they were still piloting a sleigh. Inside Gwen's house, Santa, Steve, and Grandsanta bickered over who would place the bike under the tree. Arthur pleaded with them to be quiet. He could hear Gwen waking upstairs.
It's Christmas!
They heard Gwen say. Santa understood that Arthur was the reason Gwen would still believe in Santa Claus. He told Arthur that he should be the one to deliver the present. Gwen bounded down the stairs and raced to the Christmas tree. Arthur, Santa, Steve, and Grandsanta hid in a nearby closet. They glowed as they watched Gwen open her new pink twinkle bike with stabilizers.
Santa brought me the bike I wanted!
Gwen shouted with joy. Santa looked proudly at his two sons. Steve deserved to be Santa Claus, but Arthur already was. Without Arthur, Gwen would have stopped believing in the magic of Christmas. Looking at Arthur fondly, Santa and Steve both decided that Arthur should be the new Santa Claus. The Clauses snuck out of Gwen's house and were hoisted up into the S1, but Arthur slipped and fell to the ground. Snow collected on his face, making it look like he had a big white beard. He turned to see Gwen looking in his direction. She wiped her eyes, and Arthur was gone, whisked onto the S1 in a flash. Gwen would always believe in the magic of Christmas.
Ho, 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 ho! Merry Christmas!
Grandsanta cried as the S1 flew back to the North Pole.